Hello, hello, is there anybody there? It seems I'm all alone again. Does anybody care? This planet's empty. I see no signs of life. Please don't tell me that the human race did not survive. There are no people in the future. There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are my people? I guess I fly away.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. Yes, it is Monday, October 16th, 2023. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Out to Coop Live. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. On Out to Coop Live, we talk to progressives, activists, and troublemakers of all sorts, right from our own backyards from across the country. You can join us at the end of the week for our Friday Politics Roundup, where we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can support this show, become a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress today. You can help out the show right now if heading over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. And if you're one of our awesome podcast listeners, make sure to leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen on, and leave a comment to let other folks know why you like the show. You'd be amazed how little things like that help other people find the show. For more PA Progressive Talk, tune in to Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern. Check him out on his YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook for all the streams. And subscribe to his podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Check out thericksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And got to check out that Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast, the amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And they know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter. And subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcast. If you haven't heard, The Signal has a new podcast. Yep, it's a new podcast for the Bucks County Beacon. It's even not so new anymore, but it's fantastic. And The Signal is hosted by the Beacon's editor-in-chief, Cyril Michaleko, and produced by this guy, yours truly. Twice a month, The Signal will shine a light on right-wing extremist currents streaming through Bucks County and beyond. Cyril invites guests who can provide insight, analysis, and organizing solutions so that we can steer the community toward calmer, saner, progressive routes. And in case you missed it, the Beacon also launched a new Gen Z-focused and hosted podcast called The Civic Circle. Episode 2 of The Civic Circle just dropped, and it rocked. Check out all the podcasts at buckscountybeacon.podbean.com for all that. And, subscribe just using whatever podcast catcher you use. iTunes, Spotify, they're everywhere. Check them out. Attention all you gamers out there, the Game In, that's with 2 N's. The Game In is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything from retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, walls of Funko Pops. And kids get discounts when they get A's in the report card. Got to check it out. Check them out on their Facebook page. Follow them on Twitter at The Game In, again with 2 N's. Got a question about a game, look for something hard to get, shoot them a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. A shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at SongADayman. That's with 2 N's, at SongADayman on Twitter. Well, today, a little bit of a dragging myself to the board today. I know, and that's surprising maybe, because we missed Friday. There were some appointments that were involved. There were some doctor's appointments that were involved with people in my family that got switched around at the last minute, and that was that. So I'm sorry there wasn't more notice of that. Kind of missed this past Friday show, but it's been I'll tell you, it's been a weird time. It's been a while since I've I don't know, just been. I've always been stressed. I've always felt like I've overworked. Always feel like I don't have enough time. But right now, I'm just dragging for reasons that I just don't quite understand, to be honest with you. And so tonight we're gonna have a little casual out to Coop Live in the spirit of kind of rebooting going forward. Um, I was in the middle of last week. I was all geared up for kind of reaching out to a couple folks who have been wanting to reach out to before, and there was just like these little bits of news would come in. Some of it just kind of very local stuff with like my work. But then what happened in Israel and the Gaza Strip. It's horrifying. I mean, it's just you know, uh, it was just one of these things. I could feel it coming. I remember this feeling. I said, "Oh crap!" After that kind of like massacre, um, that those Hamas whatever militants, terrorists, whatever you want to call them, like slaughtered all those Israelis, right? Citizens, children, women, every didn't matter. And then there was the retaliation against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and the locking it down and cutting off food and water. You had one of the lead military folks from Israel calling them animals. Um, and what I could see was going to happen, right? I remember like thinking about this. Um, is that it's social media is just going to get crazy, right? Um, and it was like this, it's like this dance, this weird dance that happens, and I know this tendency on the left all too well. I certainly expected it from the right, but it's like suddenly the only way that that like the media seems to know how to make sense of such horrific acts as this is to just to play team sports, right? And frankly, we've been trained to do the same thing, and so watching these statements come out and these petty arguments back and forth about um the side with Israel, the side with the Palestinians, and look, it's the massacres are there, and like, look, I totally understand the impulse, right? I understand the impulse from those folks who've been like working for years to try to talk about this systemic apartheid state in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. I mean, any human rights organization like the UN has called this largest world's open air the world's largest open air prison, that this is an apartheid state, and look, so much of the way that the U.S. media covers Israel is through the lens of the Holocaust and World War II. And look, at some level that's appropriate, right? I mean, it's absolutely appropriate to kind of understand like the history of Israel and so on like this, right? Um, but the government of Israel right now, right, are not the persecuted, right? I mean, they are a right wing extremist version of that government, and Sam Cedars talks about this on the Majority Report all the time. He's like, he's like, look, I'm a supporter of Israel. And if for Israel to stay, right, for Israel to kind of be successful long term as a state, right, for it to continue to exist, it cannot treat Palestinian people this way. And you say like the extremism of the settler movement and the extremist in the Israeli government right now are the worst enemy of Israel. In his possession, and I totally get that. And then I also get like look, you have the Palestinians who've been herded into walled prison camps basically in the Gaza Strip, and you've seen in the West Bank, which you have the settler movement, which is like literally bulldozing over Palestinian property in order to kind of claim it for Israelis. And that's been ramped up since this new, coalition government with Netanyahu and the extremists in the Israeli government. And so like there's all this, this back and forth when we start talking about peoples and nations as like as if they're one thing, right? And it's the most dangerous move when we start equating people, all the people in a particular space, or all people of a particular religion, or all people of a, particular, ethnicity, however you want to frame that. When we use broad categories and then say that they're all the same, I mean, it's the classic move of demagoguery. It's the classic move of genocide. It's like reducing horrific acts and then blaming everybody. This is one of the things. It's like when Hamas goes in and slaughters civilians, right? And they're slaughtering them because they're Israeli Jews, right? They're they're equating those people with the policies and the history and the Israeli movement and things like this, right? And of the extremist government, right? They're doing that. They're saying because you are associated with support for Israel, we are going to kill you because you're personally responsible. That 10-year-old child, that 5-year-old child, right? That new mom is that guy, that old man. They're all they're responsible. They're just culpable, and therefore deserve to die. And then when the Israelis kind of turn around with, I mean, it's not like, anyone in any of the Palestinian states has nearly the kind of arsenal that Israelis have. So they just start kind of like, you know, bombing some of the most densely populated city in the world and say that they're going after Hamas, but you have military commanders saying that, look, we're going after animals. And then now the count today was like well over 2,000 to 2,500, people dead in Palestine or in Gaza. And the government says we're going after Hamas, and yet you see thousands of people dead, kids dead. So I heard an interview from the BBC last night. We were talking, interview these doctors in these hospitals and say 40% of their injury victims, severe injury victims in the hospitals were kids. That figure's pretty close to what the death toll is there too as well. And it's awful. And I don't know. There was one. Naomi Klein is one of my favorite writers. Period. And it was interesting. I was talking to my friend Mike Gambone. He writes. You might have recognized him from writing. I write some of the book reviews for the Bucks County Beacon. A guy I worked with in Union for years. He's like one of my oldest friends at the university. I don't know why that's relevant to what I'm going to say, but anyways, I bumped into. I hadn't seen him before. All right. We just kind of whatever. Um, so I ran into him, like, yeah, and he's like, oh man, Naomi Klein's new book, Doppelganger, and I just picked it up and was just going to start reading it, and I said, oh man, she's one of my favorite. And Mike was saying is like, yeah, she's kind of right on the money. It's an amazing book, and I remember her, and I was telling him that I saw an interview with her about that book, where she's saying, basically what she tries to do is like map a political movement, a moment. And that was always my experience and why I was always drawn to her work. Because one, she's I think just a fabulous writer, and two, she has a way of kind of connecting the dots, right, so to speak, and not in this kind of conspiratorial way, but kind of helping us understand any particular moment. So, in any event, so I was sitting there and just feeling really, I dipped into social media to, watch these kind of black and white arguments, right, where you know, yeah, again, it's people on the left who just like are blaming all Jews, right? Like doing that equation with the Israelis and all Jewish people, in Israel, and and on the flip side, saying no, 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 the Palestinians kind of like they slaughtered. You cannot stand for this kind of terrorism, right? And like as if it's like this mutually exclusive thing. And I always, I teach these classes when we always talk about when you get into pro con either or stuff is like you got to look for like you've got to look for the those voices that are left out of that narrative, right? You know, got to look at from, well, what if we don't group the world together in team sports, right? Government and or peoples and peoples like this, and we looked at it, and so I don't know if you saw this, but I'm gonna read this to you because it was the one thing that gave me a little bit of solace for this, and this was Naomi Klein writing on Wednesday, this past Wednesday, in the wake of this horrific violence and war crimes, really, right across the board, was here. But here's what she says. She said, "I spent the evening in candlelight and tears with a dear friend who just learned that a close family member was among those massacred in Israel. I won't name the kibbutz to protect her privacy, but yes, it was unequivocally a massacre. We tried to explain the killing of this family member, a civilian with two kids, to our kids. We tried to do it in a way that would not fill their young hearts with fear and hatred for people who committed the crime. That was hard enough, but it was possible. Harder for us adults is the fact that, in their desire to celebrate the powerful symbolism of Palestinians escaping the open air prison, is that Gaza, which occupied people have every right to do, as some of our supposed comrades on the left continue to minimize massacres of Israeli citizens, the civilians, and in some extreme cases, even to celebrate them. In fact, these callous displays are a gift to the militant Zionism, since they neatly shore up and reconfirm its core and governing belief that the non-Jewish world hates Jews and always will. Look, even the bleeding heart left is making excuses for our killers and thinks that Jewish kids and old ladies deserve death merely by living in Israel, right? That's that argument that reinforces it and how Zionists respond. For Zionist believers, and Klein says, like, I'm not one of them, Jew hatred is the central rationale for why Israel must exist as a nuclear armed fortress. Within this worldview, anti Semitism is cast as a primordial force that cannot be weakened or confronted. The world will always turn away from us in our hour of need. Zionism tells us, just as it did during the Holocaust, which is why force alone is presented as the only conceivable response to any and all threats. The Israeli state's current murderous leveling of Gaza is the latest unspeakable, horrific manifestation of this ideology, and there will be more in the coming days. The responsibility for these crimes of collective punishment rests solely with their perpetrators and their financial and military backers abroad. But we will all have to figure out how to make it stop. How do we confront this violent ideology? For one thing, we can recognize that when Israeli Jews are killed in their homes and it is celebrated by people who claim to be anti-racist and anti-fascist, that is experienced as anti-Semitism by a great many Jews. And anti-Semitism, besides being hateful, is the rocket fuel of militant Zionism. What could lessen its power, drain it of some of that fuel? True solidarity. Humanism that unites people across ethnic and religious lines, fierce opposition to all forms of identity-based hatred, including anti-Semitism, an international left rooted in values that side with the child over the gun every single time, no matter whose gun and no matter whose child. A left that is unshakably morally consistent and does not mistake that consistency with moral equivalency between occupier and occupied. Love. It is certainly worth a try. In these difficult times, I'd like to be part of a left like that. And that's it. That was her article. And I can imagine, look, and I'm not obviously in Naomi Klein's head, but I can imagine that was a difficult piece to write. Right? Naomi Klein is Jewish, right? She's written about this before. And it's just the horrors on both sides of this. And the way that we're asked to put ourselves in these boxes. It reminds me of after like 9/11, right? Either you're with us or against us. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists, right? That's how it was framed after the 9/11 bombings. If you dare raise any question, you're considered a traitor or worse, that you helped enable the terrorists. That was the way that the logic works, and that's the way it still works. And that was horrific. And that really, sat with, sitting with me all week. I'm not alone in this, watching with here, figuring kind of what can we do? when it's just lots of death is going to happen, is happening. So, anyways, I think that had a, that was a chunk of it was just kind of sitting with me so hard all week. And, and I couldn't help, and I don't want to kind of do the like, it's just like, no, because it's not just like, but it reminded me a lot of what's been happening with our school boards. And it's been reminding me a lot what's happened with our politics. Um, and the reason I started this, we're talking about, this is all playing itself out on social media and watching people go these corners is because just some of that way, a lot of that, the toxic discourse, right? Which is, I've come to think of it, it's just another version of like just the team sportism, right? We're just going to root for our person, right? Or our side or our ideology. There was a long time when, people like me who, were in college in the 90s and grew up in the 80s and stuff, when you got involved with the political movement, and I know this is still true today, but I mean, it was really strong. I remember back then, and it was always, about you got to take a position, right? You got to take a position. And there were critiques of all the, like the humanist stuff, right? That Naomi Klein is talking about here. And I remember about, about liberal ideology and all this other kinds of stuff. And, when you got involved with political movements back then, as I did, you're really, when you said things that were considered like, I don't know, humanist, right? We had call out culture back then too, as well, right? You were called a poser. You were called like a dilettante. You were called like, oh yes, yeah, you claim to be a lefty, but really you're just, I mean, not just, I'm talking in general. You claim to be a lefty, but you're just kind of like a liberal in disguise, right? All this kind of stuff. And, you know, that kind of exclusionary discourse, that kind of like holier than thouism, that kind of like, team sportism, as I was, saying there, where you have to, in order to be part of our team, you have to meet all these kind of criteria, right? And then if you're not there, if you're not there already, right? If you don't have the correct beliefs, then we're going to oust you. It had a way of being very powerful in defining in-group cohesion, right? But it was always done at the expense of keeping that in-group, right, especially on the left, very small. Right? Because who the hell wants to be part of a movement when it's just going to be about monitoring? Are you just doing things, saying things correctly? You're no longer doing it for the right reason, And there's something about this, and I remember there was this one theorist, right? He's a literary theorist. His name is Terry Eagleton, and Terry Eagleton he was considered one of the leading theorists to kind of first really getting going postmodernism and post-structuralism, right? To popularize it in academics, right? He wrote this book called In Theory, right? Or I think it was In Theory, and it's very popular. And Eagleton was, very kind of critical and very kind of, people, would debate whether he was like a Marxist, like the right kind of Marxist and all this other kind of stuff. But, you know, he wrote all this stuff and was very much part of that theory movement. And then he, later on in his career, he published this book that was, the book that was kind of say most personal, most biographical, most spoken from the eye, was called After Theory. And it's been a while since I've read that. So, maybe just misremembering it might be telling you things that I took away from it rather than what he says directly. So I'm going to put that up front there. So, haters going to hate, right? But that's one of the things that was remarkable about that book. It was, there was a certain degree of kind of like a confessional in it in a way. That's the wrong word. It was more like a reflective tone to it, which was saying we kind of took our eyes off the prize, right? It became about fighting for terminology and correct terminology and analysis and all this that became a smaller and smaller group. And really the whole purpose, right? The whole purpose of theory, right? Is, if you go back to Marxist theories, the philosophy has only interpreted the world. The point is to change it, right? as someone who studies rhetoric, I've come to think of theory and philosophy and all this ideological stuff that we do is the background work, that you can do to kind of help understand the world, right? To help kind of understand why things are the way they are, or what's going on here. But the stating of the theory, right, doesn't change it, right? The dynamic is different, right? Once you kind of understand it. So now the next question is, okay, how do we do this, right? How do we build a movement that is built on the principles that we claim, right? That's about universal emancipation, right? The end of oppression. Like, it's built on equity, diversity, right? It's kind of like multicultural democracy, right? Small d from the ground up, right? I mean, all these, the things, and Klein, I remember, I don't know which book it was in, but she talks about the kind of reclaiming of the term of humanism, right? And I really do think that's kind of the move, is that there's got to be the space for care, right? And of course, some feminists have been arguing for this a long time, like that care economy, right? The whole idea about we got to shift it. And I think a lot of people in political circles, like I remember people talking about this at the time. I was like, and I didn't fully understand. This is like, I can remember even this before I really kind of understand what all was at stake in these arguments and stuff. And it was like, the care, they're saying the care economy, there's going to be all like this touchy feeling, and they want to get away from hard. And I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense to me. It's like most of our lives are spent in like in care relationships, right? Whether it's caring for kids, whether it's caring for each other in relationships, whether it's caring for a community, whether it's caring for elders, right? And most of that work is like unpaid, but highly valued by people, right? Not by politicians, not by but like if you think about the stuff that matters, right? That is at the core is like, how do we elevate that, right? That's care economy. And it's also that same thing is like, like people at the front. And so when I read this piece by Naomi Klein, and why I wanted to share it with you tonight is simply because, you know, she says it right there. You know, she wants to be part of an international left rooted in values that side with the child over the gun every single time, no matter whose gun, no matter whose child. A left that is unshakably morally consistent and does not mistake that consistency with moral equivalency between occupier and occupied. One of love. So I don't know. What's the connection? I'm not sure I have the connection for you tonight. But I know that was, that's that really framed my week. And it wasn't just my week, certainly. But there's a couple things that I wanted to point out to you. This is I feel I should do like a secondary sideshow, like called like mailbag or something like this. In particular, the mailbag star of the week is like starry-eyed JGC, all right, one of our longtime supporters. She's been sending just some great stuff. And she sent me this tweet that was kind of screen captured and tweeted by Jess Piper. Um, uh, Jess Piper, she. I don't. I don't expect you to know who she is. I mean, I didn't know who she was. She's executive director for Bloom, Missouri, former Democratic nominee for state rep and host of Dirt Road Democrat podcast. That's who she is. Anyway, she posted this, and it was and this is what she said. She said, "This grifter always says the quiet part out loud for those too dumb to read between the lines. He created the CRT panic, and now he's working to connect terrorists to academia. Share this, put it on all your socials. He did it once. I'm positive he could do it again." So this was a tweet from Christopher Rufo. Yes, indeed. You probably already guessed that. And this is what Christopher Rufo said publicly. He said, conservatives need to create a strong association between Hamas, BLM, DSA, and academic decolonization, that's in quotes, in the public mind. Connect the dots, then attack, delegitimize, and discredit. Make the center left disavow them. Make them political untouchables. There's the plan, right? I mean, you got to give it to this guy. I mean, this is the plan. He's captured it perfectly, right? This is not simply just like let's attack. Well, I'm going to attack the left. He's giving people a strategy of what to do, right? And he doesn't say we need to kind of like help people understand these. We need to create a strong association. There is no connection between all these different things. So they're going to create it. We need to create it rhetorically, right? That association between Hamas, Black Lives Matter, Democratic Socialist Association, Democratic Socialists of America, rather, and academic decolonization in the public mind. We need to craft this in people's mind. Why? Because when you connect it, you put that all together, you can then you attack them, which will help delegitimize them and discredit them, right? And then this guy knows the truth. The center left, right, those center Democrats will then turn and disavow those folks on the left. Because that's all they know how to do, because they don't want to be, they want to be kind of like the neutral party. And so they will attack those on the left. Why does Christopher Rufo want to do this? Right? Because look, this is what the right wing, if you think about what's happened in the Republican Party, right? The reason why we had to deal with this school board stuff anyways, right, is because the Republican Party politicians, right, after, kind of like stoking the fire of kind of racism and all this kind of stuff for decades, they are now running scared from their base, right? And Christopher Rufo is one of those people, right? One of those people that is pushing, right, the most extremist positions with the Republican Party and among conservatives, right? And then he knows that his party, right, they had to make a choice. And the Republicans, from the Republicans' perspective, they've made their choice, right? All the extremism, they decided to throw their hat in with them. They threw their hat in with Trump, right? I don't care what these people said in private conversations about what they really think. When it came down to voting for something, when it publicly supporting like Trump, or publicly supporting January 6th insurrection or whatever you're going to talk about, some of these most extremist stuff, they sided with them because they were afraid of their base. So Christopher Rufo does not want that to happen on the left. He doesn't want to have some of the strongest movements on the left team up with or put pressure on the center left of the Democratic Party, so that the Democratic Party, those centrists there, no longer try to fall over themselves to sound more Republican than the other one, but rather say like, hey, if I want to keep my job, I better start listening to these people, start supporting them. And so he knows this is a way of like driving a stake in between the movements and the official, leadership of the Democratic Party. And he's telling his people, anybody who will follow his Twitter account, what you need to do. And if you check into right-wing media right now, or even on Twitter, it's already happening. So, that was another kind of thing, another little moment of difficulty, shall we say, this week. Oh my God, I'm sorry. One of these things. So, I'm looking at this, and we've got less than a month left before the municipal elections and the school board elections. And we'll see what happens. I mean, I know there's people here in Penridge that are working their butts off in support of the Penridge Community Alliance. That's kind of what the banner they're going under. So if you are in the Penridge School District, you're voting for the Penridge School Board, it's like Carolyn Sciarrino, Leah Foster Rash, Chris Kaufman, Ron Wirtz, and Bradley Merkel Gump. That is who you want, right? I'm going to drop this right now into our chat, right? These are the people that you want to vote for. It's what has happened here, I'm not going to rehearse it all over again tonight. I mean, anybody, if you're listening to the show for any length of time, you know as well as I do that we've talked about this ad nauseum. And now it's I mean, it's great to see the organization. It's great to see the organizing. It's great to see these candidates working their tail off. Um, we're also in a fairly conservative region, and because people play team sports, um, are you going to vote for the person with the R next to their name, or are you going to vote for someone who's actually got kind of our kids' best interest at heart? And we're going to see, right? I mean, I do think that this election is, it is a referendum on the community too. It's like, who are we? You see these things. We are Penridge. Well, who is Penridge? And that's a tricky thing to say, but I do think that that's part of the stakes here. I say it's tricky to say because, like, look, the fact of the matter is that voter turnout during school board elections is extraordinarily low. In normal times, most people cannot tell you who's on their school board. Now that's changed somewhat in Penridge. I mean, now we've got some high profile Moms for Liberty extremists on our school board who've given Penridge a name, in the worst possible way. So we shall see. So do what you can between now and November 7th to get out the vote. If you can donate some money, if you can help out by sharing their social media, tell other people, tell your neighbors, talk to your neighbors about it. Put a yard sign out. Right? I know that, people always, go poo-poo yard signs. But as I've said on this show before, if you talk to political operatives, okay, like, people like who are, professional campaigners that work on political campaigns and all this stuff, and they will give you data, quote unquote, data about the effectivity of yard signs. Okay. And generally what they mean when they are talking about effectivity of yard signs, right? What they're focused on are the translation of does a yard sign convince somebody to vote for your candidate? Right? And this is where I would agree with them. No. If I put a yard sign out my yard, it's not going to convince everybody to kind of go and vote for them. Right? So if you're thinking about it in those terms, right, yard signs to those people are ineffective. Right? But I have always contended, and I will still contend, that yard signs are important because they let other people know they're not alone. They let other people know that there is hope. That's one of the most difficult aspects of the kind of political environment we're living in right now is despair is always right around the corner. Despair and the kind of kissing cousin cynicism. And that comes a lot of times. And, again, if you look at social movement research, it'll show you again and again is like that comes from situations where you feel like you're alone. You feel isolated and disconnected. So what that does is it starts to build a community. Now here's the trick, right? The trick is that if you know that political organizing, right, changing the direction of like even like a school board is not something that happens overnight, right? Then you put that yard sign out there, yes, ahead of election because you want people to vote for these candidates, but you're also putting it out there for the long haul, for the long term. Because people remember that over time. I'll never forget the moment when I was doing a little canvassing in my neighborhood. This is last year, I guess. And I had the voter registration, and the goal here was to go out and kind of talk to Democrats, right? And everyone had always said, and some of my neighbors who are also we were kind of, they're teachers or they're Democrats, they're unionists or whatever it might be, always would always feel like we're in the minority around here, right? And so I'm looking at the voter rolls, right, and looking at the Democratic list. I'm going to go and kind of knock on their doors and talk to them, introduce myself, that kind of stuff. Which I'm, I don't know I don't know what you think about me, but it's not the thing I'm the best at. I have to admit. But nonetheless, whatever, did some of that. And what was remarkable to me is that in my little neighborhood, I could not believe the number of registered Democrats that were in my neighborhood. Right now, look, I don't translate Democrat equals progressive, right? I don't, I don't see it, but they just have a D after the name. But I had no idea. Right, there'd be people I see and I, just wave to people. I walk my dog all the time, so like, you wave to people and things like this. I'm just like, whatever. Probably in the back of my brain somewhere, I'm like, oh, I'd probably just avoid talking to them about politics because they're conservative. Come to find out, I'm full of shit. Right? That my perception of where I live, because I had been told for so long that I live in a conservative area, I just made assumptions, right? I thought I was alone. I thought I knew two or three people that, okay, were on, that I could talk to, but I was kind of like, in this little area where I was completely like, had like dyed in the wool Republicans all the way, or, right wing conservatives all over the place. And turns out, no. And for me, right, during these school board candidates, this is the first time that I've actually kind of met communities of people since I've lived in Percy that are connected to all this stuff. And that goes to, the credit all goes, to the crew of folks at, the Penridge Community Alliance and all these kind of the school board candidates who are running, and the organization that has been there, the people who have been building this for the past kind of, like 5 years or so. I remember when I first moved to Percy and I tried to get in touch with local Democrats, right? And I was basically chastised for not knowing where the meeting was, right? Told to sign up for a mailing list, and then would get emails that were just kind of like, someone just talking about things that are going on and talking about other people, but then asking when there's a meeting, there's going to be no meeting. So I just assume, that's going to continue to go on. And that's my own fault, right? I mean, at the time I had other things going on. I was really involved with my union at Kutztown and so on. So I was, we built up to a strike and all that kind of stuff. So, there's other things that was going on that I didn't push too hard. So I'm not going to be too hard on myself, but it's that kind of mentality. And I bring that up, right? Not simply just to, tell you about my experience, but that's one of the reasons, but I've had that conversation with so many people. When they start seeing those yard signs go up and like, oh wow, I'm not alone. And I think, look, the people who have been doing all this work for these political candidates who've been out there knocking doors and everything are really at, at the cutting edge of building a new future for this area. Right? They're laying that groundwork, building real solidarity, real community. So, and my hat goes off, it goes out, goes out to them. My hat goes out, my heart goes out to them, my hat comes off to them, that kind of thing. So I know, and again, I know we've got really serious school board races in Palisades. We've got serious school board races in Souderton and in Central Bucks and in Quakertown and Lehigh Valley. And I know, so I'm just talking about Penridge here tonight, but I do think, I was telling, like, it's my son's birthday this week, right? And I was my folks came here from New York for the weekend. We were kind of here for the whole weekend, and I was talking about it last night, and I'm trying to tell them what's going on, right? They're asking like, oh, what's going on? Is it really that bad? I'm trying to explain what's going on, and I feel like a crazy person talking about it. And they're like shaking their heads. They're like, I can't believe this is happening in this little place like Percy. Like a little place that nobody knows about. Right? Nobody outside this region knows what the hell percocy is. And if they've seen the sign, they say they call it percasi, right? You know this. And yet here we are, the tip of the spear of a national right wing strategy, the first school district ever to hire Jordan Adams and his like extremist consultants, Christian nationalist curriculum, and to pump that crap into our schools. Wow. Wow. So yeah, that's what's been going through my mind. What's going through yours? What's going through yours? I keep on getting all these messages. Who is messaging me? Are you guys messaging me? Tell me. You checking it. Hey, Kevin, you all right? Hold on, I'm gonna go check. Oh, okay. Never mind. Yeah, so that's kind of where my head has been at. And then, on top of that, whatever. I mean, I've told you about, I don't want to sit there and kind of bellyache about getting sick all the time, but man, it's been some of the worst allergy season that I've had, and it's just it's been doing me in. I'll tell you. Well, we'll see. We'll get it all squared away. We'll get it all squared away. Anyways, I'm just glad to be back in the studio again tonight. I'm glad to be back here doing this. And you know, I've said this before, and I'll say more about this another time. But it's I find myself continuously to go back, continuously coming back to the question about how to use this space in the most effective way, how to use the growing independent media space in Bucks County, and how to be part of that in the most effective way. And I'm really trying to sort that out, and if I'm really honest with you, it's like, I have like competing things going on right now, right? Like, I mean, one of them is like, which I've talked about, on the show, has been, I just had some like health stuff that could, it seems like it's never ending, right? Thank God none of it's serious yet, but it's the kind of thing that could have been, right? And who knows? Maybe will prove in the short term or long term that will be. But it's just been, it's been one thing after the other, and um, so I've been thinking a lot about, trying to just negotiate a whole bunch of stuff like that, and then trying to catch up on work because I missed so many days at work right at the beginning of the year. Um, but I'm also thinking about, you, you know, I'm really enjoying the work that I'm doing with the Bucks County Beacon. Producing podcasts with them, and I'm really curious. My dream had always been to establish a community media center, basically, right? I even set up a whole nonprofit, was ready to go, and we had this kind of very, I mean, literally, it was kind of seat of our pants, like attempt to get something off the ground. And it was really cool, and I think, technically it's still registered as a nonprofit organization, but um, it's been to do that, to coordinate and work together in kind of areas. I mean, I would love to do things like, God, like working with people on media strategy, for example, or to working with kids and kind of setting up podcasts about not just political stuff, but other stuff too as well. It'd be so awesome to have a hub like that. And I've also been doing a lot of thinking about, how to, again, yeah, how to be most effective with that, and how to kind of make use of that, and 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 how to make sure I got the time to do things well. And it's been kind of posed to me by myself, right, quite a bit of late, about just wanting to, want to do something and do it well, and having to think about what to do with that. In addition to thinking about, what the hell am I going to do with the rest of my life? Um, that's like legitimately a concern. So we'll see. I mean, there's been, there's another kind of negotiations update that we got today from our union. I haven't read it yet, but it's like, we'll see what happens in this contract. I mean, I really think about, I wish I had more to talk about on that, or even, but there's like no information like of, of significance that I've seen. Maybe I'll eat my words after if I read the update today, but, um, I it's just been a weird time to be doing what I do. I mean, I'm watching, I've been part of higher education for so long, and I'm watching something I really loved and cared about just being destroyed. Um, um, Watching my career turn into a job. Um, it's just been a weird time. So there's lots of kind of points of reflection and thinking about, how do you best use the kind of, chapter 2 or 3 or whatever of your life, in a way that can be effective, especially in the wake of what's gone, is devastated, and I'll say this too as well. I mean, I don't know how I got off on all this track tonight, but you know, it's funny is like for the longest time in my life is that, there's when something was going wrong, right? Something was happening. It's like I was, always try to be like, or not try to be, we just want to be front and center, right? Want to be I'm not front and center, but want to be, directly involved and get all this kind of stuff, do organizing stuff. And I do what a lot of kind of activists and organizers, all the political folks have done over the year, invest, 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 and kind of burn out and crash and get back up and do it again and do it. Blah, blah. And the school district stuff is a really of a different magnitude for me. And it's been, and part of it's been frustrating because of, when I generally run this podcast at the same time as Penridge school board meetings, which is one of the things that's been going through my mind is like, do we need to change the time and do all this other kind of stuff? But it's the kind of fight that just feels just exhausting. And I'm like, look, I'm on the edges of the direct fight. I mean, you watch what happens in those school board meetings, right? You watch those, and those are the people who are directly in the fight. They're there every single week. Right. And I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm tired, frustrated a little bit, and a little bit kind of in this reflective mode. So, there it is. Anyways, I'm going to call it there tonight. And, thank you all for kind of stopping by, spending some time here. And I know I've said this, there's probably nobody listening by this point because they're like, oh God, he's a freaking like depression ball this time. If there's other people out there well, I'll say this for another time. Anyways, this is Kevin Mahoney. I am the editor and founder of Raging Chicken. I want to thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I look forward to the week ahead, and trying to kind of find a way to take back the space of this community, being a part of that in an effective way, and keep doing what we're doing, everybody. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for support. Roddy. See ya.
I guess I fly away.